So our next speaker is Sean McDermott. I got to know Sean several years ago, actually at a Singularity University Summit in New Zealand, and discovered that we both had a lot of very forward-thinking ideas about education. He's a really bright school administrator, school leader, and I'm delighted that he's able to share what they have been doing in Hong Kong with his school there. So I'm going to put you on mute from here, Michael, and I'm going to invite Sean to come and speak. So just a moment.
Great, thanks, Alex. Can you hear me, everyone?
Yep.
Okay, we're good. Alex, okay, that's fine. I can't see myself on screen, so I have no idea what I look like. I'm going to speak quickly, echoing a lot of what Michael said, and thank you for that, Michael. I really enjoyed hearing about your perspective. And I'd also like to echo what Michael said in thanking Alex for organizing this and for all of you for joining us today. Let me see here. Okay. Okay, so very quickly, context. We're a international secondary school in Hong Kong. I think we're in week 8 of our online learning. We got the word that we were closing during the Chinese New Year holiday, so the last few days of Chinese New Year were rather frantic for us, but we were up and rolling and delivering our program on Monday after Chinese New Year. And as Michael said, we've been running a full program, so learning continues, very much so. But it's been quite a journey so far, and hopefully there are some takeaways that will work. So the way that I'm presenting this is I'm going to talk about some of the things. I mean, there's a lot here, but some of the things that I think have worked for us, some of the things that you definitely want to consider that have come up for us as a secondary school. I'm going to briefly touch on technology, but as Michael said, there's a million and one things out there that people are using, and I think they all have worth. And then I'm always reluctant to give advice, but there are some things that are possibly worth thinking about. So I'll finish with those. Things that have really enabled the online learning for us is we have a student and learning management system called Gibbon. It's been developed in-house, and as Michael said, it's one place that the students can go to find everything they need. So there's not a dozen different places that students go. They go to this place, they see their timetable, they see their schedule, the links are all there, everything's ready to roll. There's one place, one starting point for them. So you can have a few different resources for delivering learning, but if they're starting from one place, that makes a big difference to the kids. We're very fortunate in having a very strong school culture. I think what we've found is that this has been a real magnifier in terms of the things that are working well in our community, and some of the things that also we need to work on. And so we're extremely fortunate to have a very sort of student-oriented, focused and solution-oriented staff who are quite sort of technologically proficient. So so people moved quickly, and we're very fortunate about that. I think clear and consistent communication, single point of communication. You don't want the head of school saying one thing and then 30 minutes later an email goes home from a head of year saying something slightly different. Communicate. The flow of information has been extremely well managed here in the school, starting with our head of school, Toby Newton, and that's been a real pleasure to observe. The way we've managed our communication has been very reasoned, very evidence-based. It aligns with government announcements, real clarity, transparency. I think that's been extremely important, and I think that's helped build trust within the community during this time, which again, we can set up and run the best learning programs that we can, but if we don't have trust and we don't have a sense of community, it's extremely difficult for effective learning to take place, as we all know, right? And what we've found is that starting with strong routines, that sort of continuing from school, were really important. So signing into tutor groups in the morning, having a chat, how's it going? Right, let's move on to period 1, learning continues. This is what we did before Chinese New Year. We're online now, but this is after. So we started with very strong routines. And for our senior students, our exam classes, the year 10s to 13s, that's continued throughout until now, which I think is week 8 or 9. Week 8. And they've continued their routines. What we found was, so considerations, what we found was after about 4 weeks of sort of traditionally structured learning and timetables and things like this, that we found that our year 7 to 9 students, so our younger secondary students, were sort of ready to pop. It became quite stressful. Families were starting to, kids were starting to sort of tune out a little bit. It was hard for them to maintain focus. It was hard to maintain sort of an academically oriented approach to learning, which we never really emphasized from the start anyway, but everyone wanted to do the right thing and definitely sort of provide the view that learning continues. As Michael said, you know, we've been surveying very frequently throughout, so we were able to identify that this was starting to become a challenge, and so we sort of shifted phases in learning. So what we've done is the 10s to 13s have continued, but what we've done is the 7s to 9s have moved to sort of a few hours of sort of structured type learning in the morning. So there's a check-in, and then we have some physical movement where we dress up and we're like 80s fitness instructors, getting people moving and having a bit of fun and telling a few silly jokes and just checking in with the kids and seeing how they're getting on. And then we're moving to sort of a reinforcement sort of literacy, numeracy and languages type program that runs for a couple of hours in 40-minute sessions. And then we're moving to a self-directed learning model in the afternoon, where we have a whole pile of units that are pre-prepared by teachers that are interesting and fun. So it's everything from stop motion animation to, you know, baking bread to, you know, to do everything that you can think of. You know, to building robots and just all sorts of things. And we've found that program evolution has really helped keep our 7s to 9s engaged. Now, the first 4 weeks, so we had our more structured program. The last 4 weeks, well, and until the holidays that are coming up at the beginning of April, we will continue with this phase 2. And this program is evolving. We're moving into phase 3. For after the break, we were planning for a phased-in return from the 20th of April. We found out a few days ago that distance learning is going to continue past the 20th. We don't know when we're going to return. So we're moving into phase 3 with always that eye on the return to school, as Michael said, which is so important. So we're sort of we're working through these phases with this endpoint always in sight, which is that there's going to be a need to be a phased return back into school and all the considerations that come with that. So we never take our eye off that. Another consideration is that I saw in some of the comments earlier that there is definitely an increased teacher workload delivering learning online, especially with the secondary, the conversations about pieces of writing and things like that happened sort of in the moment in classrooms. It's much more difficult to have those online. So what we're finding is that with our senior students, especially, we're delivering and we're chatting, and then later comes the reading and the feedback and things like that. So we're finding a big increase, and teachers are doing this at home alone, as you know. So there's this real sense of isolation. So again, as Michael said, you know, we're really checking in with teachers all the time. The senior leadership team, each of us has people, chat groups and things that, you know, we keep things nice and light. And you know, there have been some individual instances come up where people have needed extra support, where staff have needed support, and that's fine. We can always have a conversation and figure that out to make sure that people are supported and our community remains strong. So that's extremely important. Financial support for families, you know, that is a consideration. So, and some families have contacted us right at the start. We messaged our families and we said, let us know if you know, if you need support on the financial side, and we can certainly help with that. So what we're doing is our board chair contacted all of our community, and we're redeploying. We had some scholarship funds sitting there for certain types of scholarships. We are going to redeploy to support our families. And we think, you know, we're well positioned. The finance committee of the board met early. This is the other thing we've had excellent support from our board right at the start of this thing. The finance committee met, the board met, and we all agreed on what this was going to look like. So that's been super important as well. Learning outside your teaching, your teaching staff, you've got your support staff, your learning support assistants, your counselors, things like this. Definitely, we've been very careful to communicate the message that these our support staff are essential to the ecosystem of our school. So there's not going to be any talk of, well, now the students aren't in school, do we still need to pay for LSAs and things like this? Yes, we do. And yes, they're absolutely important. And yes, they are contributing enormously to supporting students at home. We're finding that LSAs have been essential in supporting a lot of our more reluctant learners, those that are a challenge to get online for some of our students. Now that we're in week 8, it's just frequent chats during the day for our English second language students in English. For some of them that are finding online learning a real challenge, that's where they are. Our LSAs are taking on a lot of that, and that's okay, and it's great. So that's been really important. We've also discovered the limits of technology. We got very clever at one stage there, where we had multiple hosts in various Zoom rooms that kids were rotating through. Michael's nodding, but we found that we kept signing each other out, and there was this big disaster, and there was, it was just a couple of days, half a day of sort of scrambling to fix that. This has been helped by, we've had an online Zoom support room open, like a help desk, staffed by a member of SLT. So we started with teachers in one and SLT in another, and parents and students could go to them and say, look, I need help with this and that, can you help me? And we would help them. The teachers one was for your sort of day-to-day questions, and if some difficult questions and challenging questions came through, then they could forward to SLT. We found that this lasted about a week. The teachers help desk, because we're obviously watching workload has been super important. We don't want to overwhelm teachers at all. So that's dropped away, and now it's just SLT manning the help desk. And we had a few inquiries in the early days, but now we have it open all the time, and we sort of rotate in and out during the day, but it's working extremely well. And it's a real support to our community. So the help desk has been super important on Zoom. There's been, we've had some announcements this week. So there's been quite a bit of uncertainty these past few weeks when it comes to exams, what's happening with, IB exams. So now we know that, and GCSE, so we're an IGCSE school. Now we know that those exams are not taking place, but we don't know now we don't know what it's going to look like. And so there's some uncertainty in the community and so managing uncertainty and complexity, and communicating through uncertainty and complexity, and those considerations have been so important. So they've been, as I'm sure, again, Michael, I hope I'm not, but I just, referring to you, just basically what Michael said, but basically lots of discussions, lots of talking through scenarios, lots of thinking about the ifs, and lots of care when it comes to communication. I can't emphasize that enough. I'm just conscious of time, so I'll spin through this very quickly, and there's a lot more that I could share. Pastoral support for students has been extremely important. Just checking in with kids, noticing who's not there, not following up, your child is absent, what's going on, get them into classes, absolutely not. Check-ins, how's it going? Hey, we noticed that, Johnny's not been with us for a little while. Is everything okay? Is there anything we can do? Light touch, and having heads of year, having teachers check in. Needs-based, whoever you think is the best person to check in with that family, that person checks in. So that's been really important. Definitely phasing in the learning. In the early days, I mean, there's, as Michael said, there's tech companies offering free, extended and pro versions for free now, which is great. We paid for, like for example, Zoom, we set up business accounts right at the start because we quickly found the limits of the free version. And having that in place right at the start was really important. It costs, but definitely worth doing because you'll save yourself so much heartache later. Maintaining financial reserves, not only now, but 6 months from now when we're on the back end of this thing. So schools are coming under a lot of pressure to perhaps cut fees, reduce fees, offer discounts, all these sorts of things. And we understand where that comes from parents who are concerned about their financial situations, but we also need to be able to run a school 6 months from now on the back end of this. So financial viability is extremely important. So, we're watching that very closely. I've mentioned surveys, I've mentioned frequent staff check-ins, and I think one thing that we've found really useful is physical movement. Just keeping the kids moving, and it doesn't need to be like a hardcore daily exercise program, just movement and valuing well-being, and saying to families, especially the 7s to 9s, if the classes aren't working on this day, then that's okay. Take a break, do some baking together, take a walk, maintaining social distancing, whatever works, to maintain well-being, because I think that comes first. I could go on, but I don't want to overstay my welcome.
That was excellent, Sean. Great, thank you very much. There's a lot of very practical, insights in there that I think should be very helpful to people who are just getting into this, just starting to face it, and are going to face those sorts of practical problems on the way. So fantastic. Thank you for sharing that and preparing that. Again, just like Michael, please stick around and contribute in the chat as we go along.